Alrighty, so let's get started. So this week's SSV is all about plant community assemblage. We'll be exploring this concept with a series of studies done by Kenneth Cole in the 80s, which he coalesced into a paper in 1990, about reconstructing past desert vegetation using pack rat middens. So this study is based on the idea that ecologists have been mulling around for hundreds of years, and that is, how do plants assemble into a community? We assign certain ecosystems, but how do the plants get there? Where did they come from? And have they always been there? And ultimately, under a changing climate, do they move as individual species or as a whole community? So this picture right here is taken from the Santa Ynez Mountains, just over the hillside from us. And you can see there's lots of different plant communities here and lots of different individual species. And so as ecologists, we're really interested in how these species came to exist with one another, and if they're moving as a whole community or as individual species. So particularly Kenneth Cole and other scientists decided to try and answer this question in the Colorado River and Plateau region, which host a variety of climates ranging in aridity and elevation. This is a region in the southwest that covers Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and California. And so they sought to ask this question: how did plant communities in this region exist in the past, and how does that inform us of the current community today? So they went back as far back as the Wisconsin glaciation. So the Wisconsin glaciation was part of the Pleistocene, and it lasted from 86,000 years to 11,000 years ago, so pretty recently. And the glacial maximum was only about 20 to 26,000 years ago. So this image right here, this map I have, shows where the glaciers were about 20,000 years ago. And you can see that a lot of New England, as well as the upper Midwest, were all completely covered in ice, in glacial sheets, including where I grew up in Cleveland. However, the region that we're interested in is down here, and this was not covered in glacier, but it was a lot cooler. So it's thought that this region was about 3 to 5 degrees centigrade cooler on average. And so this would be as if the average temperature for this area was 80 degrees Fahrenheit annually, then the average dropped down to 70 degrees Fahrenheit for this particular region. And so to try and reconstruct the plants in this region, Kenneth Cole decided to use pack rat middens to reconstruct the historic vegetation. Now, what is a pack rat midden? Pack rats are in the genus Neotoma. They're native to North America, and they have this really strange behavior by which they collect plant material, not necessarily to eat, they just collect it, from about a 30-meter radius around their home. And when they collect this plant material, they urinate on it. And when they urinate on it, it crystallizes. So it becomes basically almost like amber, if you will. So you have this crystallized plant material that's a record of the plants that were there potentially thousands upon thousands of years ago, especially when these middens are hidden under rocks. So in this way, these particular little middens act as the records of plant species that grew surrounding this area back thousands upon thousands of years. So by breaking up these middens and identifying the plant parts, we're able to reconstruct the vegetation for this local area. Now in this region, we have a map of of aridity, so how dry it is. And you can see there's a pretty good variation of how dry it is for this particular area. And Cole was able to collect various midden sites all along this gradient. And in addition, these midden sites also span a very big difference in elevation. So the altitude of these particular sites was very different as well. So to just kind of visualize what kind of data we're going to get from any of these sites, let's focus on one midden site. This is Picacho Peak in southeastern California. So if we look at Picacho Peak, we have, so what this graph is showing, it's showing the abundance of macrofossils. So you can see on the lower x-axis the plant parts per kilogram of midden debris, which is actually on a log scale, by the way. And then on your y-axis we have the age, so they were able to radiocarbon these sites and figure out the age. So we're starting with the most furthest back we have for this particular site is about 12,390 years old, all the way to present, basically. And so you can see that each one of these columns is a different species, and you can see each of these species is responding very differently to time. So as we go towards modern time, which is going from the bottom up, you can see that certain species behave differently. So for example, Yucca brevifolia, or Joshua trees, which you guys may or may not be familiar with, used to grow in Picacho Peak area in California about 12,000 to 11,000 years ago, but it has since disappeared from this particular region. Right? They no longer were finding samples of this plant. Now, other species behaved a little bit differently. Some species have been here almost forever. So Encelia farinosa, if you remember, this was from one of the first discussion papers that you read about leaf adaptations to high light environments. And Encelia farinosa has been here pretty much the entire time. Now, some plants have disappeared and come back. So, for example, Phaerocactus acanthoides, this is the barrel cactus from Park Nobel's study that we did an SSV on in, I think it was week 2. This species was here for most of the time, highly variable in its abundance, and then it dropped out and came back. And then some species are really recent additions. So Ambrosia dumosa, we briefly touched on this species in class with regards to facilitating little areas, preventing herbivory. Ambrosia dumosa is a new addition to this community in very recent years. So in the last, maybe in the last 100 years, ambrosia showed up. And so what this is suggesting is that, or pretty convincingly suggesting that there's an individualistic nature to species change. So no matter what's happening to the climate, some species will hold on, some species will drop out, other species will come in. It's not a community-wide shift. Now this is a really cool, I love this graph. So on your x-axis you have in thousands of years before present, that's what BP means. So we're going back about 24,000 years before present. And these data were accrued by looking at the middens in the Grand Canyon area. And on your y-axis you have the elevation. So you're looking at elevation and what types of plants you are finding at these different elevations. And the dotted lines represent kind of the dominant associations between different types of species. But we're just going to focus on a couple species that shifted. So for example, what we're finding is that as this area at low elevation moved towards present, the particular plant community that came into being was desert community, which was different than 20,000 years ago. Also, blackbrush changed in terms of where they grew. So blackbrush and junipers moved up in elevation. So did spruce trees. Spruce trees were found 20,000 years ago. There you find them around 2,000 meters in elevation, and now you find them at 3,000 meters in elevation. So they've actually retreated to higher elevations. And this is reflective in terms of the tree line, right? So the tree line is the line of elevation which it's too stressful for trees to grow above, whether that's water availability, temperature, etc. It's just not suitable for trees. And so 20,000 to 15,000 years ago, the tree line was at a much lower elevation than it is now. And so what this is kind of allows us to do is to reconstruct these previous plant communities. So this figure is hard to see. I apologize for that. But what you can take from this is you have the Pleistocene vegetation in the top graph, and you have modern vegetation in the lower graph. And it's all along an elevational gradient. and it shows kind of more or less, if you look on the x-axis of these, where you would find them. So Mexico all the way to Utah. And if you look in the Pleistocene vegetation, there were a lot more tree species at the lower elevations. And as climate changed from, only 25,000 years ago, not very long at all, a lot of these species migrated. So not only did they migrate upslope, but they migrated up the river, so following the Colorado River up in elevation. And what this permitted, or what this created potentially, was a desert habitat. And so in these lower elevation areas, you have this desert habitat where different types of species can move in. So what does this mean? Well, for this particular area, the Colorado River and Plateau, plant species are now 700 to 900 meters higher in elevation, so they've retreated up into the hills. And they've also retreated upstream, so they've moved about 400 to 700 kilometers in their range upstream, up the Colorado River, than they were 20,000 years ago in the late Wisconsin. And ultimately, kind of the bigger picture is that this is a classic example by which we've determined that plants generally distribute in an individualistic manner. So not all plants conform to general patterns of migration, and suggesting that coevolution of species is likely rare in nature. So individual species are reacting to their environment as a species, not necessarily as a plant community, and they're not tied down to particular environments or cohorts of other plant species. So just to wrap it up, this guy, the Captain Wayne on YouTube, if you want to check him out, he's quite amusing. I was searching for pack rat midden videos and I found him, and he's absolute YouTube gold. Thanks for listening.